Welcome everyone. We will be starting shortly, so we'll start at about 1:35, giving people some time to log on. Thank you for joining us. Welcome everybody. We'll be waiting a few more minutes before we start, giving people time to log on. So we'll be starting at 1:35. Thank you. Welcome everyone. We're giving people time to log on and we will start shortly at 1:35. Thank you. Welcome everybody. We're waiting for one more minute and we'll begin the presentation, trying to give people some time to log on. Thank you for your patience. So welcome everyone. We're so glad to have you here for the Emergency Rental Assistance Workshop. We will now begin this presentation. Angelica Alcantara will be our presenter. She will provide you with a lot of information. You don't have to memorize it all. At certain spots, she will tell you, take a picture of this because this is a good thing to remember. We will also be sending an email afterwards to everyone that signed up for the Zoom with more details on the presentation and follow-up flyers. So with that, thank you so much, Angelique, for being here with us.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angelique Alcantar. I'm currently working with the JDOC division of the county with emergency rental assistance and isolation and quarantine support. I hope you all can hear me okay. So basically, I'm just going to go over the two assistance programs that are in place right now. And the first one being the emergency rental assistance and the other one being isolation and quarantine. And like Teresa said, it's a lot of information, so please don't, feel like you have to write everything down word for word. We will be sending out some info, and then we'll also be answering some questions. So we can start whenever we're ready. Thank you, Sandy. So today's topics: emergency programs available for renters, what do I need to apply, eviction, know your rights, and how to start the application process. So the programs and services. So the first one is the California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program, or ERA. It's emergency rental assistance. That is through the state of California. It is rental assistance that's available for rent owed dating back to April 2020. You can receive up to a maximum of 12 months of past due rent and 3 months of future rent that can be made if the applicant qualifies for 100% of the assistance available. So the full month owed would be paid if you're eligible, and if you apply and you're eligible. And you can assist with up to 100% of some utility bills, including internet, with the maximum of 12 months of utilities that can be paid. And the second program is the Isolation and Quarantine Support Program, or IQ, and it assists individuals who tested positive for COVID-19 in the last 90 days. This program provides rental or financial assistance, food, and or potentially hotel room assistance as well. So these programs are per household. So a definition of a household is you live in the same home. It could be 2 or more families, but it's basically the household pays for their expenses separately. So mom, dad, and baby, rent a couple rooms in the house, and they pay their rent, they pay their groceries, they pay their part of the bills separately. And then mom, dad, and 2 babies live in the same house, but they rent a separate room, and they pay for their part of the rent, they pay for their groceries, they pay for their expenses separately. Those are 2 separate households under the same roof. So it's just to give you an idea of, even though you all live at the same address, you can be separate households if everything's separate. So one of the big questions that we get through these programs is, what is the impact to immigration status? What is public charge? So the Department of Immigration assesses individuals who are in the process of immigration to determine if they have been a public or financial burden to the government. This is only done in 3 instances. I think it's on the, oh yeah, there you go. Sorry, Sandy. If you could go to the next slide. I think, so only 2 programs fall under the public charge definition, and that is cash aid, so like supplemental security income, temporary assistance for needy families, and the citizen child's receipt of these benefits does not, I don't believe it affects the immigrant parent. And then government funded long-term care. And you can also get more information on public charge on the public charge website at USCIS. Because that does kind of change. And so the pandemic is a state of emergency. So immigration has published the following: assistance related to the pandemic is not considered public charge, and requesting emergency rental assistance is not considered public charge. So this is emergency assistance, and you definitely, it's affecting the whole world. So you don't really have to worry about this emergency assistance affecting any public charge outcomes for anyone in that situation. So the first program we're going to talk about, is the California COVID-19 Emergency Rental Assistance Program through the state of California. And so this program is for renters. If you have been impacted by COVID-19, you're income eligible and have unpaid rent or utilities or need help with future rent or utilities, you may apply for the California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program. And so this is just a brief overview. There's a lot more information on the state website, but the state California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program can provide up to 12 months of past due rent and 3 months of future rent. It is not counted as income for renters, so the tenant would not get a 1099 at the end of the year to report it as income. It's not going to affect, any benefits that you might have because you received this assistance, and it's not going to be like a loan that you have to pay back. It's not counted as income, and it's not anything that you have to pay back in the future. Utility bills can be included if they're in the name of one of the adults on the application. So if the PG&E is in your husband's name and the internet bills in the wife's name, as long as they're part of the application, the bill can be included. The utility bill can be included. Internet can't be included. Cable cannot. So internet is a utility that's able to be included in the state application. PG&E can be included if you pay like trash or sewer separately, which usually it's included in the rent. But if you, for some reason, pay that separate, it can be included. The water bill cannot be included as a standalone bill. The reason why is the California Water and Wastewater Arrearage Payment Program from the California Water Boards has been implemented and is available for delinquent water bills. So if you have any questions or you need assistance with delinquent water bills, you would find more information about that program at waterboards.ca.gov/arrearage_payment_program. And so definitely take a screenshot of this page if you're interested in water bill assistance. And if the water charge is included with your utilities as part of the rent, so if it's like explicitly stated in your lease, it's included in the rent, then you would potentially be able to add that to the application. But if it's a separate water bill that you pay, separately, that's when you would go to the California Water Board. So you will need some IDs for every adult in the household. Get a copy of the ID for everybody, the adults, and the application will ask for information regarding household members, birth dates, and IDs, but not for minors. So anyone under 18 doesn't have to provide an ID, but we would, the state application just asks for the full name and the date of birth. And so the application will ask for rent amounts paid. So, there's going to be questions about, a copy of a lease agreement, a copy of maybe a rent ledger if you owe past due rent, any kind of, like past due notices that you may have received from the landlord. If you got like a rent increase letter last month saying that your rent's going to increase starting in February, hold on to all those things because you're going to have to provide, some documentation to show what your rent obligations are. And you will be asked to provide the landlord's name and contact information. So the state will reach out to the landlord to kind of confirm their involvement in this rental agreement. And you may be asked to provide supporting paperwork. So everything's kind of on a case-by-case basis. If you, have like, let's say, cash income or things like that, there might be different documents that they might ask for. And so the eligibility requirements, basically, if you had a financial hardship due to COVID-19, which, unfortunately, this pandemic, I think a lot of people have been affected by the pandemic financially. If you're at risk of homelessness or housing instability, so if you have proof of past due rent, then obviously that is your proof of that you're at risk of homelessness or housing instability. Income is below 80% of the area median income. So if there's a little table coming up, but if your income for your household is below 80% of the area median income, then you're eligible based on your income. You will need an email address that you have access to. And when you create your account, the password should include 12 characters, one upper and lowercase, a number, and a special character. So, it's just kind of one of those things to just kind of have in the back of your mind that, you're just going to create a password that you're going to remember and that you have to have access to your email address to continue with the application. So ERA income eligibility, so low income households less than 80% AMI. So we're gonna get the number of household members, which is each person living in the home and responsible for the expenses, including children, and the income, total income for all adults living in the household. So this is gross income. This is income before taxes are deducted, before healthcare is deducted, before, you know, your 401k or, you know, anything else is deducted. So your gross income, if you're a household of one, low income 80% AMI is an annual income of $82,450. If you're a household of six, your you know, total gross low income would be 136,600 for the year. So it's very expensive to live in this area. So unfortunately, you know, we are all kind of in that low income 80% or 50% or 30% because living in this area is very expensive. So they do take that into consideration when calculating the area median income. So in addition, the payments are not issued on a first come, first served basis. So the most vulnerable tenants are generally paid first, which means that if you are in the very low income bracket and or you have received a 3-day notice or an unlawful detainer summons, if you're, you know, basically in the process of, you know, potentially facing eviction, then those more high risk type of applications, vulnerable applications will be processed first before, you know, everybody else, just because they want to make sure that they avoid evictions if possible. So some documents that you would need to submit with the state application. So this is just to give you an idea so you can you know, start gathering some documents is you would need a government issued ID. It can be expired or it can be from a foreign government as long as, you know, it can be translated. Verify residence. So anything, you know, kind of proving you're receiving mail at that current address. You will need a email address that you have access to, the verification of rent owed. So if you owe past due rent, anything from your landlord, you know, a rent ledger, past due rent notice, you know, things like that. And also if you have like a lease agreement, anything in writing that you potentially have from your landlord, if that's a pretty straightforward situation. Other things can be accepted if you don't have like a written formal lease agreement. And so verification of income would be one of the following. So a tax return from 2020, if you have your W-2 or 1099 and or 1099 from 2020, current check stubs. So if you do have paycheck stubs, you would need your most recent 2 pay stubs. Or if you are approved for CalFresh or CalWorks, you can get your most recent renewal notice that shows that you are receiving CalFresh or CalWorks. If you are paid cash, if you have zero income, if you have no proof of income, you can still apply. There are attestations available in the state application. So if you get cash income or you have zero income, you would indicate that in the application and you would check the box basically saying like my electronic signature on this application is attesting that this zero income or this cash income is true and correct. And if you're asking for help with utilities, you'll need to provide past due statements of utilities, PG&E, garbage, internet from April 1st, 2020. So let's say you owe, you know, December of PG&E and you owe January. So you would just get the December, January bill if you can, and get those gather those bills up to start, you know, to input the past due amounts on each bill for each month, sorry. But basically, you know, if you do owe utilities, just gather your most recent utility bill, and then we would go from there if we're helping you submit the application, or you would upload your recent utility bill and information, and then, you know, upload any kind of documentation from the utility company showing like you owe, you know, $500, but it's $100 each month from, you know, January back. So, you know, just kind of need to start gathering some documents for the state application so you can upload them into the application, you know, faster. So for landlords, this is just kind of a general information, regarding the landlord part of the application. So if the renter takes steps to verify that they meet eligibility requirements and sign the application, um, the renter will be notified once the application is submitted, and the landlord will also receive a notification stating that an application was submitted for this property address. This is the application number, and the email is going to ask the landlord to submit their required information. So all the payments that are received, all the payments that are sent out to the landlord directly to pay for the rent, the renter's unpaid rent, generally speaking, so long as the landlord properly participates in the program. If the landlord agrees to participate in the program, payment is made directly to the landlord on behalf of the eligible household. If the landlord refuses to participate, the payment will be made directly to the renter, with the understanding that any funds received from the state program are to be paid to the landlord for their rent. So, the state's not going to give you this money just to give it to you. You're basically accepting the funds, understanding that you're going to pay your past due rent or your future rent that you're requesting. And as far as utilities go, utilities are paid directly to the utility company. And that's the reason why they ask for the utility bill, so they can make sure to, you know, pay the bill directly to the utility company, specify your account number, and, the payment address and things like that. So these are a few more details. Again, it's a lot of information, but it is important for the tenant, client, applicant to gather the following information to assist in smoother application processing. So if you're going to be doing the application on your own through the state website, just it's a little faster if you just have everything ready to upload into the application. If you have the landlord information, that way you could kind of get it all done in one session, and then just review everything, before you submit. So make sure you have the landlord information, the landlord's name, the address, the phone number, and the email address. Regarding sublease situations, so when a tenant rents a room, or something along those lines, the recommendation is to provide as much information as possible. So the master tenant would be listed as a landlord, and if there's no formal documented sublease agreement, then potentially the master tenant would provide a written statement documenting basic info. So let's say I rent a room to John Doe, to Jane Doe. So I, John Smith, rent a room to Jane Doe at 123 Main Street, San Jose, California, 91234. Jane Doe pays $100 per month in cash for rent and utilities, and currently owes October 2021 $100, November 2021 $100, December 2021 $100. Signed, John Smith, with John Smith's phone number and John Smith's email address. And so John Smith would be listed as a landlord in the state application. And then when John Smith is contacted by the state, then John Smith can say, yes, I have a lease agreement for this apartment, but I rent a room to Jane Doe. And so, John Smith would potentially get the rental amounts owed from the state on behalf of Jane Doe to satisfy their sublease situation. So this is just kind of based on the information we have available from the state. This is kind of a way to submit documentation up front for the application, and then the state would contact you, the caseworker on your application would contact you if they needed any more information or more documentation. So the ERA expectations, so just to confirm, there's no information requested regarding criminal history, citizenship, immigration status. None of those questions are part of the California COVID-19 rent relief program application. Regarding cash or zero income, this can be attested in the application if there's no documentation to verify income. So once applications are submitted, applicants may monitor the status of their application by logging into their state application account or by calling a program representative at 833-430-2122 between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. 7 days a week. Applicants will be automatically contacted by a program representative once their application is reviewed. So we've been told it can take up to 4 to 6 weeks for the application to be assigned to a case manager. And any if the application is found to be missing required documentation, you should get an email from the case manager, and you can also check your account status. So you would just log in to see your application status, and there would be messages from the case manager there as well. And so the recommendation is that you log in every 2 weeks for updates. And again, you can also call the state program and just check like if there's anything that they can see that maybe you're missing because it's been a few weeks and you haven't heard anything. And so you can apply for you can only apply for the assistance that you're responsible for. So if you're only renting a room, you can provide a letter explaining the circumstances. Basically, like if your part of the rent is $1,000 and your roommate doesn't want to be part of the program, you're not able to apply for the full month's rent if your part of the rent is only $1,000. So either you and your roommate can apply together if you want to apply together under one application and request the full month's rent, or you would apply on your own as your own household for your part of the rent, and then you would provide a copy of the lease agreement stating like, my name is on the lease with so and so, and I'm only responsible for $1,000 a month of this rent, so that's why I'm only requesting $1,000. So that's just to give you an idea in case there's any questions. Like if you provide a lease agreement that has more than your name on it, the state might ask you like, well, why are you requesting only this amount, or why are you requesting this full amount and your application is just you by yourself? So there might just be some clarifying questions as well. And so that was regarding the state program. And if you guys have any questions, if anybody has any questions about the emergency rental assistance provided through the state of California COVID-19 rent relief program, while we don't have access to specific applications, through the county, we are helping clients submit at their application, kind of help them navigate that. Um, but we can kind of give maybe some information regarding what we do know. So it looks like Janelle asked a question: is this program similar to HPSCB homelessness prevention system or Housing is Key? Is this another program? So the program, the Emergency Rental Assistance California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program, is the program through the state at housingiskey.com. So originally there was a separate county program for very low income families under 30% area median income. And that was through the county with basically all the community services or organizations that within the county, like Sacred Heart and Catholic Charities, and all those community service organizations were working with the county with the homelessness prevention system COVID-19 response. But that program ended in September. And so the state basically said, we're going to take over and do everything. So then that's why if you requested assistance after September, then everybody's just been routed to housingiskey.com, which is through the state. And so the HPSCV program through the county ended in September of 2021. And now everybody that is requesting rental assistance for Santa Clara County residents should be going through housingiskey.com, which is the state of California COVID-19 rent relief program. I hope that answered your question, Janelle. And Vanita is asking, are cell phone bills considered utility? Are there specific criteria to meet because of COVID-19? So cell phone bills can potentially be considered a utility if you can, if you're stating like, my cell phone internet is the only internet that I have access to. Like I can't get regular internet, or I don't have regular internet. My cell phone bill internet is the only internet I can use. Then you could potentially include that. And there's also another question from Vanita: are there specific criteria to meet because of COVID-19? So as far as the application requirements are concerned, basically it's if you experienced a financial hardship due to the pandemic. So like, let's say, you had to keep your kids home from school. So you had to, hire a babysitter, or you had to stay home and you couldn't work full time, or, you had to get internet at home because your kids had to do homeschooling, let's say, or due to the pandemic, your your older parent or relative that you care for wasn't able to go to their senior program, so you had to, do something extra at home to kind of keep their needs met, or even, you have reduced hours or you were laid off, you know, due to the pandemic. Um, there's a lot of reasons on the actual application, and then at the end of the application, if you technically don't meet any of those reasons that are already stated, then you can put in like your reason. So, you might say like, well, I had to buy more food because my kids had to be home, and so I had to buy more groceries, and the bills kind of got, the PG&E bill went up because my kids were home all day, or things like that. So hopefully that answered your question, but you can actually specify on the application if you're not able to just check a box, you feel that doesn't help, explain your situation, then you can always type in, what your pandemic experience was, and how you were affected financially. And so an anonymous attendee asked, once we get the help for the rental assistance, do we have to pay that back later? And so we do not have to pay back any assistance received if you are the tenant. So if the tenant receives rental assistance to pay their rent owed, they do not have to pay that back. They don't have to report it on their taxes. It's not a public charge if you're in any immigration situation. If you are the landlord and you receive assistance, rental assistance for one of your tenants, you will get a 1099 at the end of the year because it does count as income because it's rental income. But you won't have to pay it back. You won't, again, it won't affect the landlord either. Like the landlord doesn't have to pay it back. The landlord won't be affected of any immigration situation, but the landlord will get a 1099 at the end of the year because they'll be reporting it as rental income. But as far as paying anything back, you should not, nobody will have to pay anything back. As long as you provide all your proper documentation and, everything is approved and processed through the state for the months that you are owing, then you should be fine. You wouldn't have to pay anything back. And then I think in the chat there is, so Anna was asking, what if your rent is not past due, but will be due this coming month, and you are going through financial hardship for being out sick of work, for positive COVID, had no sick time? Do you still need to wait to get a past due letter? Can you be evicted if you don't pay rent on time? So you can, for the state of California COVID-19 rent relief program, you can apply for future rent. So we are in January. Sorry, I had to double check that. So you can apply, you can submit an application to pay, let's say, for example, you want to request February, March, and April, because you could do like 3 months at a time. And right now, I believe the application is open through April. And so you can, submit everything you have from your landlord. The rent is not past due, so you wouldn't have a past due notice, but you would just, submit a copy of your lease agreement, things like that. And then the state would process that application and potentially help you pay future rent. So the only thing I would say is you can't be evicted. There should be no legal action processed in any kind of court of law if your application is submitted and is in process. So as long as you let your landlord know, I submitted an application for rental assistance through the state of California, here's my application number, this is when I applied, and you can send that in an email, you can send that in a text message, you can write a letter, just make sure you take a copy, and just kind of document for your own self, your own notes, like I notified my landlord on this day at this time, this is how I notified them. Then your landlord has to do their part of the application. And the application needs to be processed. So as long as you have an application pending with the state of California COVID-19 rent relief program, there should be no legal action on against you, because you have to wait until that application is resolved. You can't, there's nothing you can do until the state of California processes that application. So technically, if you apply and you let your landlord know that you applied, then that eviction stuff needs to be on pause until the application is resolved. So if the application is denied for some reason, which it shouldn't be, but if it is, then then your landlord could say, okay, application's denied, let's move forward. Or if you when your application is approved, then okay, application's approved, here's your money, and I still live here. So hopefully that answered your question, Anna. And then Cecilia asked, what are the possibilities of getting the rental assistance denied? So as far as we know, the only time we've seen, you know, I mean, we we don't have access to the state, live information, but the only possibility of getting denied is potentially like if there's some, inconsistencies or discrepancies in the application where it's like, you said this over here, but then on this screen you submitted this and it shows, that you make $100,000 a month, or something like that. Um, or if you don't communicate with the case manager. So once the application is assigned to a case manager, if the case manager tries to get a hold of you, they call you, they send you emails, they send you messages through the state application, and you basically ignore them, or, for whatever reason, you're not able to get the messages. And maybe like a month later you check in and they're like, well, we gave you time and you never replied, then they would potentially deny the application for being like unresponsive. And potentially maybe the last part would be like if somebody at your address already applied for assistance and already requested the assistance for the months that you're requesting. So if you do live in a situation where you have roommates or you have multiple households under the same address, you might want to just touch base with everybody to see like, okay, do we want to just submit one application together, or did you already apply? And what did you apply for? What months, what amounts? Like, make sure that everybody's on the same page if you live with more than one household or you live with roommates or things like that. Because if assistance was already provided to that address for that month and you're requesting the same month at the same address, they're going to ask you for some clarification. But ultimately, if everybody's requesting $3,000, they might say, this is a 1-bedroom apartment, we can't give 4 households $3,000 for December or something like that. So it's just to make sure you communicate with roommates, make sure you communicate with the other households at your address, and make sure that you're checking your email for any contact from the case manager, and you're logging into the state application to see if there's anything that's been updated, and make sure that any documentation you include with the application is clear. And you might even handwrite or type up some kind of document just to kind of upload into your application to maybe explain some weird situation, if that's the situation. So hopefully, Cecilia, I answered that question. And so Vanita asked, if my roommate applied for only their part of the rent, would it cause issues with mine? So I would say, as long as you're applying for only your portion of the rent, and if you have any documentation to show, like, maybe you have a Zelle printout or a PayPal printout, or on your bank statement, you can show like every month I'm, in like from June to September, I withdrew $100 every month, which is my part of the rent. And starting in October, I wasn't able to pay because I got laid off, let's say. Then you can show like, I only pay this much of the rent. Here's my lease agreement that shows, I'm one of the lessees. And as long as you're only applying for your portion of the rent, then you should be fine. Is there any other questions? Maybe we'll wait a couple more minutes just in case there's any other questions. And I was going to say, Anna, you asked earlier about having COVID and losing some income. So this next program, the isolation and quarantine support program, may be able to help you, but we'll explain the program, and then you might be able to see like if it's possible to get assistance through the IQ program as well. So we'll just wait like maybe one more minute to see if anybody has any more questions regarding the California COVID-19 rent relief program. Okay, well, I know it hasn't been a whole minute, but oh wait, we did get a question. Okay, so an anonymous attendee said, sorry, I may have missed it, but is there a timeline for disbursement to the owner? So As you can imagine, the state is a little bit backed up. And so what we've seen is, like, let's say, for example, the tenant applies, submits application, has all their documents, lease agreement, everything like that. The landlord gets the application notice, then the landlord logs in and does their application. Um, then that, you know, those two applications, the landlord and the tenant application, link up through the state system. And so the case manager would go in, kind of verify everything's there, see if anything's missing, nothing's missing. Okay, so those ones, that's a smooth application. It might move a little bit faster. Might take maybe like six weeks, let's say, 8 weeks, let's pretend, just, for the sake of argument. But let's say there's, somebody that's just asking for like 1 month of future rent, and their income is, within reason. They're not really at risk for being evicted right away. So that application might not be a priority, but somebody that has like a 3-day notice, they've already been, kind of received notices from their landlord about eviction, they're in a low income financial situation, then that application might be processed a little bit faster because they're already the clock is already ticking on them. So what we've been told is it can take about 4 to 6 weeks to get an application assigned to a case manager. And then once it's assigned, it can take another couple weeks for the case manager to review and, communicate with the tenant and or the landlord for any missing documents. And then, so it can take a couple of months from what we've been told. And there are situations where maybe when you applied, everything's okay, but now that it's been, 4 weeks, now that it's been 6 weeks, your landlord's, giving you notices and things like that. So you can always contact the state, and they can instruct you on how to submit copies of your 3-day notices or any kind of landlord notices, so that they can hopefully expedite the processing once you get to that point. But unfortunately, the state is pretty backed up, and we don't have a lot of great news about how long it takes them. They're moving as fast as they can, but it's definitely not as fast as we would like them to. So I think we're going to move on to the isolation and quarantine program, and then we'll also have time for questions after that as well. So don't worry if you think of something else. So the Santa Clara County Isolation and Quarantine Support Program is a Santa Clara County program. So that is a local program. We have access to that. And so I can tell you right now, and I know there's a little blurb about it later, but right now with everything that's going on, it is definitely a busy program. There's a lot of positive COVID tests and COVID exposures coming around in the last month or so. And so it has been a lot busier, you know, with everything that's been happening. So what is the Isolation and Quarantine Support Program? So the IQ program assists individuals and or households who have had a COVID-19 positive test or have been exposed to someone who had a COVID-19 positive test. This program offers one-time help with financial assistance or rental assistance, food delivery and supplies during your quarantine or isolation period. And we do have some hotel placements for your quarantine or isolation period that is currently very busy as well. But there is some hotel room placements potentially available for people that need help with their isolation or quarantine period. So the isolation and quarantine eligibility criteria. So you have to have a loss of income due to COVID-19 or COVID-19 exposure. So if you tested positive for COVID or you were exposed to COVID positive person and you've lost income due to your quarantine or isolation period, you do need to live in the County of Santa Clara in a participating city, which we'll go over. So not every city in the County of Santa Clara is participating in the IQ program. So like there are some cities that are choosing not to participate or have decided not to participate in the IQ program. And so they're offering their own assistance to residents in their city. And then your household income has to be at or below 80% area median income, which we went over a little bit back a little earlier. And so this is a list of the participating cities right now. So anybody that's in unincorporated Santa Clara County is eligible for hotel services, rental assistance, financial assistance, groceries, cleaning and hygiene products. Los Altos Hills, Milpitas, Morgan Hills, San Jose, and Saratoga. So those are currently the participating cities that are participating in all of the isolation and quarantine services. Right now, Mountain View, Campbell, Cupertino, Gilroy, Los Gatos, Monte Sereno, Palo Alto, Santa Clara, and Sunnyvale are only participating in the hotel placement services. So if you're a resident of one of those cities, then your city, like for example, the city of Mountain View has different resources for Mountain View residents if you need assistance, isolation and quarantine support assistance as far as like rental, financial, and groceries. So the financial assistance program with the isolation and quarantine support program is financial assistance or rental assistance. So financial assistance is $2,000 for one individual, $2,500 for two or more individuals. The client can use the funds towards whatever needs he or she deems appropriate. So let's say, you know, it's a husband and wife, two kids, the husband tested positive, you know, the wife is in quarantine because her employer told her, like, please don't come in while you guys are all in quarantine. So husband and wife both work. Husband is getting full sick time, you know, for his time in quarantine. So he's not losing any money because his employer is, you know, paying him for his time off work. But the wife has no sick time, has no vacation time, has no PTO. Employer, you know, is like, sorry, we can't pay you for your time off, but you do have to take the time off. So in this case, husband and wife both work, but only wife is losing income. So we would potentially provide $2,000 for the one individual that's losing income in this household. Now, let's say it's a husband and wife and they both work, but the husband is paid cash doing, you know, landscaping, and the wife doesn't have sick time or vacation time. And so they're both losing income. So husband and wife, the whole family has to be in quarantine or isolation. Two adults are both losing income because they have to stay home and they're not able to get paid any other way for their time in quarantine. So the household would be eligible for $2,500 if two or more individuals are losing income for being in quarantine. And so there's that's kind of just a set, like one time $2,000 or one time $2,500 for that household. Now, let's say instead of the 2,000 or 2,500, maybe your rent is like $4,000, and you and your husband losing income during this quarantine period is really going to hurt your ability to pay your rent. Then instead of the financial assistance, we would potentially do rental assistance and pay your full month's rent and potentially your utilities up to $5,000. So your rent's $4,000. Your PG&E for the month is $150. So, you know, you would provide documentation, like for example, copy of your rent agreement, your landlord's information, everybody's ID. There's a slightly longer process, but it would potentially pay for your full month's rent and your full month's utilities. You know, that caused a hardship during the isolation and quarantine period. So usually if you need something a little quicker and you really are just looking for a replacement to kind of help you recoup the week or two that you were out of work, then the financial assistance is definitely a little faster. But if you feel like your isolation and quarantine period kind of really set you back and your rent is more than, you know, 2,000, 2,500, then you might just go for the rental assistance part of the program. But either way, we would explain it to you, and you would kind of decide from there what would be better for your situation at that time. So the required documents to receive the financial assistance. So this is kind of the faster, quote unquote, faster process. So we would need a copy of every ID. I'm sorry, the ID of every adult that is that has stated they lost income. You would need to provide proof of address. So if you're saying you live at 123 Main Street, your ID can show that you live at 123 Main Street, or you have to show some kind of recent documentation that would arrive to you in the mail showing your name and your current address. And if you do not have proof of address, like I said, you would need something additional, a bill, a bank statement, you know, something that shows your name and your current address. And then as far as the income goes, You would complete a self-certification document. You would declare your income loss. It would be completed generally through DocuSign, so you could sign electronically, and your signature would include your signature and the date. If you're not able to use DocuSign, there's other methods, and we would definitely work with you regarding how to get that how to get that self-certification form done. And you may have to provide a recent pay stub, like if you're saying, I only have 10 hours of sick time, and so I did get some sick time paid, but I've been out of work for 7 days, or something like that. Then maybe you just provide a pay stub to show, like, I only had 10 hours in my sick time bank, please help me. And so then, we might potentially ask for a pay stub, but for the most part, it's just the idea of every adult, proof of address for every adult that's declaring income loss, and then every adult that's declaring a loss of income would complete a self-certification form. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this isolation and quarantine program, we are a little bit busy because of the rise in COVID positive cases in the area, or in the world, I guess. So the coordinator will get back to the client. If you leave a voice message, if you send an email, an isolation and quarantine coordinator will get back to you. We generally make 3 call attempts before closing the case. So if, let's say, you leave a message, we're going to try calling you back, hopefully 3 times, and then we'll move on, and you would just have to call us back. And so you can, once we do make contact with you, once we do determine that you're eligible for the program, then you would potentially receive assistance within 10 days. So groceries are generally during your quarantine or isolation period, but the financial assistance, once it's started and you submit all your required documents, you would receive the assistance within generally 7 to 10 days. So just like with the emergency rental assistance program, the isolation and quarantine program does not require a Social Security or an ITIN number to apply. So no, you do not need a Social Security number or ITIN to apply for the program. And another question is, if I receive, or can I receive assistance from the isolation and quarantine program and help with rent through California COVID-19 rent relief program? So you can, if you, hopefully you don't have COVID, but if you did have COVID, or you do have COVID and you get services through the isolation and quarantine program, you can still request assistance through the California COVID-19 rent relief program. So if you owe past rent, or you want help with future, you can still submit an application to the California COVID-19 rent relief program, even if you received the more immediate services of the isolation and quarantine support program. And so another question is, if I did not qualify for the isolation and quarantine support program, could I qualify for the California COVID-19 rent relief program? And the answer is yes. So for whatever reason, maybe you weren't eligible for the isolation and quarantine program. Maybe it's been over 90 days. Maybe you had COVID, back in August, so it's been over 90 days. So, you weren't eligible for the isolation and quarantine program. Or maybe you're getting Social Security income and disability income, so technically you didn't lose income for being in isolation or quarantine. You still got your Social Security check, so you weren't eligible for isolation and quarantine support program, but you can definitely still apply for the California COVID-19 rent relief program if you were just affected by the pandemic in general, and financially affected. Like, let's say you had COVID over 90 days ago and that did impact you financially, then you could still apply for the California COVID-19 rent relief program. And so this is just a little blurb, and you might want to just take a screenshot if you're interested, but this is new rights for California renters. Now, mind you, unfortunately, this is kind of changing a lot just in the last 2 years, as we know. But starting January 1st, 2020, new laws in California will give renters more rights thanks to passage of AB 1482, also known as the Tenant Protection Act of 2019. So that, we've already, January 1st, 2020 has already come and gone, unfortunately. And if you do need help, this is the Law Foundation of Silicon Valley is actually very helpful in providing, help for renters in need that have issues with tenants, or issues with their landlords or things like that. Just keep in mind that they're also pretty impacted with pandemic related issues. So if you call them, or if you go on their website and submit a request, you are in line to get assisted, but it might take a little while for them to get back to you. It won't be like that second, unless you catch them right at the right moment. So take a screenshot of this, just to have that information regarding the Law Foundation of Silicon Valley, especially if you need assistance in that, legal assistance. And so this is just a little section about how can ERA rental assistance help stop evictions. So I'm going to pause this section here because there's some questions about the isolation and quarantine program. So I'm gonna answer those. So an anonymous person asked if one parent is a stay-at-home parent and the other parent works only. So like, let's say, for example, mom and dad and 2 kids, let's say. So mom works, dad stays home, kids are kids. So if the mom works and she had to stay home because everybody had to quarantine or isolate, and the mom was not paid by her employer, then that would be one adult that lost income, because the stay-at-home parent, they're technically not losing income if they're not working. So if the mom works and she had to stay home to quarantine, and she lost income, she doesn't have sick time or vacation time, then the isolation and quarantine program could potentially provide assistance, the financial assistance, for one adult losing income, which would be $2,000. And so Janelle asked, can you use both ERA and IQ at the same time? And I did answer earlier, but yes, you can use ERA and IQ at the same time if you're eligible for isolation and quarantine support services. And you're also eligible for the emergency rental assistance through the state of California. You can definitely apply for the state of California program at the same time. And an anonymous attendee asked, does this cover a storage payment? So for isolation and quarantine, if you're eligible for the program and you receive the financial assistance, the money is just given, there's a check sent to you and you would use it for whatever, you know, bills or payments you needed to make due to your isolation and quarantine income loss. So if you lost income due to being in isolation and quarantine and you were eligible for the financial assistance, let's say $2,000, you would receive the funds and you would use that for whatever you needed to. So it doesn't have to specify like storage or rent or anything like that. As far as, the financial assistance part of it. If you're asking for the rental assistance, that does need to be for a property that you're actually living in. So rental assistance would not cover a storage payment. And then there's a question in the chat. So where do we apply for financial assistance? So there's a slide coming up with the contact information for the isolation and quarantine support program. And then also the state of California program, you would go to housingiskey.com. And so this last little section is the how can ERA rental assistance help stop evictions? So I know I kind of mentioned it earlier, but a court should not issue summons if tenant submits completed application for rental assistance within 20 days of receiving the 3-day notice. At any point before lockout, tenants should be able to stop an eviction if they submit verification to the court that their application for rental assistance has been approved. And tenants may need help with expedited approvals, but no need for expedited payments. So you don't have to expedite any payments, but you can contact the state for to expedite the approval. So as long as you have, let's say you have the application with the state of California, it says it's approved and they're on their way to sending it out to payments, then that's enough. You don't have to say like, hey, send out the payment already if my application's approved, because the court just needs to see that your application's approved if you get to that point. But primarily speaking, the court needs to see that you have an application in progress. And that's the main thing. And so here's some legal resources for eviction assistance. So the Law Foundation of Silicon Valley, like I mentioned before, if you want to take a screenshot of this screen here. So the Law Foundation has a website where you can do an online housing intake form, or you can call them and they could do an intake form for you over the phone. Project Sentinel has some legal resources and dispute resolution. They also have an email address, and you can also call them as well. And then Access to Justice is a court mediation program. So it's free mediation in all cases. So it doesn't require a pending lawsuit. So sometimes, you don't exactly have like a really strong legal situation, but maybe you just need help talking to the landlord and resolving some issues. So maybe you just need mediation. So Project Sentinel offers that as well. And then Access to Justice, you can email them or you can call them as well for assistance. But definitely take a screenshot of this screen if you're in need of any kind of legal services. So this is just some tips on three-step eviction prevention where there's a screenshot of the flyer on the next screen. But if a tenant receives a 3-day notice, make sure to let the tenant know the following. So if you receive a 3-day notice, do not move out. If the tenant has already applied for rental assistance through the state of California COVID-19 rent relief program, then you just need to provide your landlord a copy of the renter to landlord letter and a copy of the program participation letter. So there's a letter that generates when you submit your application to the state, and you would just give them a copy of this program participation letter. And if the tenant has not yet applied for rental assistance, so if you receive a 3-day notice and you haven't yet applied for rental assistance, not move out, but make sure to complete an application for rental assistance as soon as possible. And eligible renters continue to have special eviction protections under state law from October 1st, 2020 through 2021 through the end of March 2022. And applying for rent relief may stop an eviction. So as long as you submit that application to the state of California COVID-19 rent relief program, that will stop the eviction process and hopefully get your application processed and your landlord paid so that you don't have to worry about it. And so this is just a copy of the flyer, the 3-step eviction prevention flyer. So if you're unable to pay your rent, apply immediately to housing is key. There's just a brief little summary of the income limits for up to a household of 8. Let your landlord know you applied in writing, email or text is fine. Keep a copy. And do not move out without learning more about your rights and options. So there's the information for the Law Foundation of Silicon Valley. There's a lot for information for the SEC Rent Help program that is also helping people submit their application. If you need help submitting the application, if you call that phone number or go to that website, you can get some assistance in submitting your application to the state. And if you get any court or legal papers, there's some information regarding the Santa Clara County Superior Court Self-Help Center, free and low-cost legal services, access to financial help, and then mediation, which would be the Access to Justice or Project Sentinel if you think mediation would be better. And so these are just some tips, but where do I start? So just gather your documents, prepare all the necessary information, call the hotline when you have all the information and documents. And, like I said, we do have some assistance in getting your application to the state of California COVID-19 rent relief program submitted. So there's application assistance in many languages, but definitely gather your documents and all the information, contact for your landlord and stuff like that, so that you're ready to go once the application process is started. So this is the information, Cecilia. If you are affected by COVID-19 or you have been sick with COVID-19 in the last 90 days and you need assistance because you had to isolate and quarantine, call the COVID-19 resources hotline. The phone number is 408-808-7770. You can also send an email to housing@eoc.scc.gov.org. And so we are generally open 7 days a week. Right now, the hotel placement service for isolation and quarantine, they are prioritizing homeless, unhoused individuals while they're kind of working on getting more hotels for the program. And so the hotline should generally be answered between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. But like I said, it is pretty busy right now. So if you leave a voice message, they will get back to you. And if you send an email, there's also a team responding to the emails and working with clients through email. So you do have to have, I'm sorry, so you would have to have a positive COVID test within the last 90 days to potentially be eligible for financial assistance. And if you have a COVID test, let's say you tested positive today, you call the hotline, nobody in your house can leave because everybody's in quarantine or isolation. If you're within your isolation or quarantine period, you can potentially get groceries for your household so that you don't have to leave and go buy groceries. So that is a service. The grocery service is during your isolation and quarantine period, and the financial assistance is just, if you contact us within 90 days of your COVID test and you were affected financially for the reason of isolation and quarantine, then you're still within 90 days. We can still help you. And so how do I start with the state program? So like I mentioned, you can start on your own. If you're comfortable, you can go to the housingiskey.gov .com, sorry, and start your own application. You can call a local agency for help with the process. If you start the process and decide you need help, you can save your work and ask for assistance. The website has resources in English, Spanish, Korean, Vietnamese, Chinese, and Tagalog. You can also use Google Translate for other languages at the top right-hand corner of your Google screen if you're comfortable with that. You can complete the application on your phone. There is a lot of reading, so if your phone screen is kind of small, you might be better off, using a laptop or a desktop computer. And if you text 211-211, they will give you initial screening questions and will link you to the website, ask your language of preference, and connect you to Housing is Key. So those are some ways to start with the state program. So this is just a screenshot of the Housing is Key website. So as you can see at the bottom there, it's California COVID-19 rent relief. You can click on Apply Now in English. You can click on Aplique Hoy in Spanish, or you can click on any other language that's available, and it'll take you to the application information in that language. So if you decide to start on your own, on the program page, you'll find a renter's checklist, a check off new applicant box or continuing applicant, ask for address and zip code. It'll take you to an eligibility quiz. You can add a user if someone else is helping you or you want an authorized representative on your application. You can add someone like that on your application. It will ask you how many months you have not paid or and the amounts that you haven't paid. It'll ask you about late fees. The application will ask about household members and income of household members. So make a list of everyone's birth names, birth dates, and income. If you've missed some information, it's going to stop you from proceeding. So, don't panic. Just, check where it's asking for more information and correct it and move forward. Review the application before your final submission, and we encourage landlords and tenants to inform and work with each other to complete the application. So any application information is going to come via email, and it's going to come from Neighborly Software or California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program through Neighborly Software. So that's just to give you a heads up. If you get emails, it's going to come from the California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program through Neighborly Software. And if you do need assistance in person, so the state of California has partnered with some local partner network, and you can call them and schedule an appointment with the local partner network or visit housingiskey.com and get information on some local partner networks. So like for Santa Clara County, Catholic Charities is one of the big ones that is providing assistance, as well as I believe Project Sentinel as well. And so other agencies, so Santa Clara County has some assistance with the application process, International Rescue Committee, the San Francisco Housing Department, and the City of San Jose as well. They have they have some assistance available through through each agency to help you submit your application to the the State of California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program. And so this is some information on the City of San Jose's application assistance. So they have the City of San Jose City Hall, which is currently closed or was closed until January 20th due to pandemic reasons. And then they have the Franklin McKinley School District office, which is Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday from 10 to 6 and Wednesday 1 to 8. An in-person application assistance. So they've specified it's English and Spanish, but they may have other languages available. And you can also send them an email at evictionhelp@sanjose.ca, or you can give them a call just to confirm before you head over there. They can if you have all your documents with you, they can help you complete an application with the State of California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program. And the City of Mountain View also has application assistance at the Mountain View Public Library. So it's in room 205, which is on the second floor of the Mountain View Public Library. Currently, they have English and Spanish assistance, and it's Thursdays 1 to 5. So it's like a drop-in assistance, and you can give them a call or send them an email if you I believe they might have some days where they have appointments available. And basically the same with the City of San Jose, they have application assistance where you take your documents and they would help you submit the application to the state. And the County of Santa Clara has some application assistance at the Vietnamese American Service Center on Center Road. It's currently on pause due to the pandemic related concerns, but the application assistance in that location when we are there is English, Spanish, and Vietnamese, and it's Monday through Friday, 9:30 to 3. And so for anybody that has a mortgage and they've been financially affected by the pandemic, they've experienced some financial hardships, maybe potentially fallen behind on housing payments. So eligible applicants must be at or below 100% of their county's area median income, own a single family home, condo, or permanently affixed manufactured home, and have faced a pandemic related financial hardship after January 21st, 2020. You also need to meet at least one of the following requirements. So you either have to receive public assistance, severely housing burdened, or you have no alternative mortgage workout options through your mortgage servicer. So the first suggestion through the California Mortgage Rent Relief Program is to contact your mortgage provider. So if your mortgage is with Bank of America, if your mortgage is with Flagstar Bank, if whoever your mortgage is with, that's your first step, is to contact them and go over their hardship programs. And if you're still not able to make it work, or their hardship programs are not really providing any relief, then you can contact the California Mortgage Relief Program and see what they're offering as assistance as well. So just a reminder, apply to the California COVID-19 Emergency Rental Assistance Program as soon as possible. If you receive a 3-day notice to pay rent or an eviction lawsuit, apply for rental assistance as soon as possible and contact the Law Foundation or Project Sentinel and share what is true and what you're asked for. So as far as the application goes, submit the application with the documentation to the best of your ability, whatever's current and correct. And, you don't have to submit like a copy of your layoff notice from 2 years ago, or a copy of your unemployment benefits from, last year. If your income is zero income, then that's all you need to submit is zero income. Just things like that, where just whatever's true, whatever they're asking you for, and whatever's current. And just know that you do have rights. So as far as, contacting the Law Foundation or Project Sentinel, if you are, feeling like you're getting intimidated or harassed, definitely contact some legal services to get some assistance to help resolve any kind of issue where you're feeling like, you're not even safe at home. Definitely contact some legal services to get assistance. And so Now we have time for questions. I do see a question from an anonymous attendee that says, could you please advise on whether we can use both ERA and IQ at the same time or mix and match? Will we be able to view the recording of this webinar in case we missed something? So the webinar is being recorded and it will be sent out to attendees that registered. And also it's on Facebook. Well, it's currently live on Facebook, but it would be available for reviewing on Facebook. And as far as, oh, and it'll be on YouTube as well. And could you please advise on whether we can use both ERA and IQ at the same time or mix and match? So let's say you have COVID right now, and you're losing income for being in quarantine. So you contacted the isolation and quarantine support program and you received assistance because January, just basically you weren't able to pay your rent for January, you were in quarantine, the end of December, early January, and you need assistance to help you with January. So you get financial assistance, you're able to pay your rent for January, you're able to kind of bounce back from the time off in quarantine, but just financially speaking, you are still in need. So you could potentially apply for the state of California COVID-19 rent relief program. And maybe, since January was already taken care of, you would apply for February, March, and April. Let's say you're just asking for future rent. So that's kind of a way that you might, still be eligible for isolation and quarantine program, but also request assistance through the state of California COVID-19 rent relief program. Another way, if you owe past due rent and you having having COVID right now and being in quarantine, your employer wasn't able to pay you. So it's basically just putting you further behind. So you can apply for the state assistance, for the months that you owe. Let's say you owe October, November, December, and now you owe January. You're going to request future months too, just to kind of help you get ahead. And then you also requested isolation and quarantine assistance, because you had COVID in January. So it's just you can, I guess you could say, mix and match depending on what your situation is. But you are able to apply for, in the isolation and quarantine support program, you're not going to get asked, like, have you had assistance through another agency, like through the state, or something like that, unless, it's kind of like, well, you've been getting groceries from every agency for the last 3 days, or something like that. Then maybe we don't want to like send you something that you don't really need. But as far as financial assistance goes, if you need the state assistance, then you should apply for the state rental assistance. And if you need the isolation and quarantine support services, then you should definitely apply for those as well. And then just for your reference, so this recording will be on Facebook, it will be on YouTube. If you registered for the presentation, you'll get the links in an email and they'll send you the links, the PowerPoints, and the flyers with all the information that has been shared. So there's another question, is this only a one-time life assistance? So unfortunately, this pandemic has gone on for a lot longer than anyone knew it would, because nobody knows what's going to happen now in the future. But so the isolation and quarantine support program is once per household per 90 days. So if you get COVID, if you got COVID on January 1st and your whole family had to quarantine, but you were the only one that tested positive, and you got isolation and quarantine assistance, but then maybe like a week and a half later, your wife tested positive. And so now you all have to go back into quarantine because, maybe there was a delay in testing or whatever the situation is. You wouldn't be able to get financial assistance again because your household just got financial assistance, last week. And even though this is a different person testing positive, it's still the same household, still the same address, still the same, people. So you would get financial assistance one time, per this COVID incident. Now, if let's say 6 months down the road, we're still in this pandemic and unfortunately you guys test positive again and you have to quarantine again, then it's been, over 90 days, then you would potentially be eligible to receive assistance again if you were affected again, financially or with groceries. So it is on a case-by-case basis. Obviously, we don't want people to get sick just in general. We want everybody to be healthy, but if you are, in quarantine and you receive financial assistance and you were affected again maybe a month later, then you know you would you would only be able to get assistance one time. As far as the state of California COVID-19 rent relief program, they're able to do 12 months of past due rent and up to 3 months of future rent. That program's kind of still evolving as well. So based on everything still going for the pandemic, things might change on that, on those rules as well. But for now, the emergency rental assistance through the state of California COVID-19 rent relief program is 12 months past due rent and 3 months future rent. And an anonymous attendee said, I have been in quarantine for almost 30 days because I have contact with people who were positive for COVID in December. I have not tested positive with COVID, but I haven't been available for work because I'm still on quarantine. Can I qualify for the isolation and quarantine support program? So if you have a letter from your employer stating that that you need to continue to be in quarantine, if you have a letter from your doctor that you need to be in quarantine, currently the recommendation is 5 days of quarantine, potentially 10 days, but generally 5 days in quarantine. If you have contact with a COVID positive person, if you're choosing to be in quarantine longer than that, then unfortunately, we can't help for people that are choosing to be in quarantine longer. But if you were in quarantine for your minimum number of days and you lost income for those minimum days that you were in quarantine, then you would potentially be eligible. But if you were paid for, 5 days of quarantine and you choose to stay out longer because of X, Y, and Z reason, you would need to provide like a letter from your doctor, a letter from your employer, some kind of documentation that's, stating like why you have been in quarantine longer than the 5 to potentially 10 recommended days. But obviously, everybody's situation is different. So you can definitely call the hotline and talk to somebody that can kind of go over your situation with you and kind of see like what we can do to get you assistance. So that was the last question in the Q&A, but we'll wait a couple more minutes to see if there's any more questions. So we did get another question. Samantha asked if my roommate's hours were cut due to COVID. So 1, would she qualify for future assistance? And 2, would we both need to apply? I have been covering her portion so we don't fall behind. So the first question is, if like, let's say somebody's hours were cut due to COVID, due to the pandemic, that is a reason, that you may have been affected by the pandemic. So you can definitely apply for that reason. You experience financial hardship because your hours were cut. And would you both need to apply? So I have been covering her portion. So the rental assistance is for rent that is still owed. So if the rent has been paid, then your landlord would say, well, they don't owe those months of rent. So unfortunately, the rental assistance cannot pay back like a person, like if you borrowed money to pay your rent, or if you took a loan out to pay your rent. The rental assistance can't pay back the loan that you used to pay your rent. The rental assistance is generally only to pay the landlord the rent that is officially owed. So you can apply together as one household and apply for the future months that are owed, and then that way you don't have to pay another month of future rent, and you can apply for the full months owed, because if your roommate, their hours were cut, then your household was affected if you wanted to apply together. But if she applies by herself, or if your roommate applies by themselves, then they would only be able to request their portion of the rent for future months. I hope that answered your question. Okay, so a follow-up question is, okay, so we don't need to be behind to qualify. She can apply now, or we can apply for future months. So that is true. You don't have to be behind. You don't have to be past due. So you can apply now and you can request future months. So if you apply today, January 28th, you can request like February, March, and April, let's say. And you don't have to actually be, you're not behind those months because they're future months. So we're just going to check to see if there's any questions on the Facebook live stream. Okay, so it doesn't seem to be any questions on Facebook. And so this presentation is scheduled to end at 3. So we have a few more minutes. That maybe we'll just wait a couple more minutes to see if there's any more questions that pop up. Well, it looks like we don't have any more questions, so I guess that's going to be goodbye from us. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope we provided some good information. And again, everything's going to get sent to anybody that registered for the presentation. And you can always go back and rewatch on Facebook or YouTube, and definitely get that information, get that legal assistance and submit your application if you need the assistance. Thank you, everybody.